Everyone, welcome back to another episode of Poly Talks, and today we were discussing the possibility of a Donald Trump third-party presidential run. Now, if you don't know, even though it may seem like it, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are not the only two parties in the United States, and there are also several more minor parties. Of course, they don't have really any chance of winning anything, and then there's also the possibility of independent candidacies. And actually, we have seen in rare instances in the past, independent candidacies have been successful, such as Lincoln Chafee in Rhode Island. But actually, there's never been an independent president aside from George Washington. And independent just effectively means you don't have a party, you're just running independent as just a candidate, no label attached, just a candidate. And actually, considering the opposition to Donald Trump in the Republican primary, it's certainly possible that Donald Trump loses this primary to someone like Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley. Now, if that were to occur, Donald Trump has raised the possibility and a strong possibility of running as a third party independent. And that would be devastating to Republicans, as I'll discuss below. So, in this scenario, you would have presumably a single Democrat like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Then you have two essentially Republicans, even though they may be running on different parties. You'd have the one that actually won the primary and the one that is running as an independent. And if you don't know, the United States does not use ranked choice voting for presidential elections in almost all the states, and that means that a single, it is a plurality voting system, which means that you do not need a majority to win, you just need the most votes of any candidate. So this could lead to a scenario, and it's happened before. There have been elections. There's one actually, I think, when Obama was president in Hawaii, where two Democrats won. It was a House special election. Two Democrats ran. They split the vote and allowed a Republican to win with 40% of the vote. And that same situation could happen. Just imagine. So, for example, in, let's say, Texas, even if Joe Biden wins 40% of the vote, let's assume that Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump are relatively equal in terms of support, which I would go so far as to say they are. They would each receive around 30% of the vote, and Joe Biden would win the state of Texas. And this would not happen in just Texas, it would happen in a large majority of states. And actually, as we'll discuss though, this actually would not be possible in Texas because they have laws barring a candidate that's defeated in the primary from running as an independent or third party ticket. They're called sore loser laws. And so actually, that's quite ironic the example I gave was in Texas because that is a counterpoint that there are 6 states where Donald Trump cannot run as an independent or it can't appear on the ballot. And those states are Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Texas, and Arkansas and Alabama. So those first four actually have quite a large majority of electoral votes, but actually two of them are probably favored to go to Democrats. So really, it would only be Ohio, Texas, Arkansas, and Alabama where the mainstream Republican would not suffer. But that doesn't matter if the same situation is occurring in other states like Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona, and it could be absolutely devastating to the Republican Party and almost certainly would result in Joe Biden winning the election. I mean, if Joe Biden can win against Donald Trump head to head without a notable third party candidate, then he would almost certainly win by a landslide against two warring Republicans of basically equal status. And even if they aren't of equal status, it still gives Joe Biden a massive edge. And the kicker is that this Trump third party campaign is effectively impossible. I mean, we've never seen a third party candidate win in the United States presidential election, and it almost certainly wouldn't because also you don't the electoral college is interesting because you don't just need a plurality of electoral votes, you do need the majority. So Donald Trump would have to win the majority of electoral votes, or else the House would have to decide the president. And I certainly don't think the House delegations would all go to Donald Trump. So he has almost no chance here, which means that this third party candidacy is almost entirely kind of a selfish and self interested and a self concerned move, because it would really just be a headache and a hassle for Republicans, which would be beneficial to Donald Trump if he lost the primary as an act of revenge. And so now that we've discussed the major consequences for Republicans of this move, and that is exemplified by examples in the past, like the 1912 presidential election, where the same scenarios happened. Teddy Roosevelt and William Taft split the vote, giving Woodrow Wilson a massive landslide victory. So we've discussed the consequences and some examples, but now what what could potentially happen if Donald Trump does decide to run third party? It's the same situation as Arizona. Literally the same situation. Kirsten Sinema will be running as an independent if she decides to run, and Democrats will have to decide whether or not to field a candidate, and it will become kind of a race to see who bails out first. And and that could be harmful to Democrats in Arizona, and this could be harmful to Republicans across the entire nation in 2024. So, would Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley or someone who beat Donald Trump in a Republican primary, would they end up siding with the would they end up siding with the Trump base and end up dropping out, or would they remain firm and lead to kind of a race to see who will drop out first? And frankly, if it's someone like Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, they would not, I think, frankly, come that far, win the primary against Trump, only to drop out at his behest. I think that I think that what we'd see is neither candidate would be willing, in basically any circumstances, to drop out of the race, and I do think that would lead to this third party candidacy scenario where both candidates know that their mutual candidacies mean that Democrats are basically guaranteed to win, but they're so self interested and concerned with themselves and their reputation that they would not, neither of them would drop out, and this would be catastrophic for Republicans. So now, just like any other event we'll discuss on this channel that's hypothetical in nature, we'll have to see whether or not Donald Trump does indeed decide to run third party, or whether he mercies the Republican Party and decides to support whoever wins the primary. And this is another fascinating facet of the 2024 presidential election, and I'm so eager to discuss and see whether or not Donald Trump wins. Thank you. I will see you in a future episode of Polytalks. Goodbye.